I put a round in the center of it, and it did not so much as flinch. I was close by then. Close enough to see there was no face on it at all. Where a face should have been, there was a deer's skull, bare and white in the moonlight, and the antlers came up off the crown of it wrong, too many points, branching and branching the way no living antler grows. Down in the black of the sockets 2 coals hung, dull red and steady, and they were pointed at me. It stood a head and shoulders, over 8 feet. Its arms hung down past its knees. Its skin had split like bark on a tree that has been dead a long time and has not yet gone down. I worked the bolt and put the next round higher and knocked a chip of white off the skull. Still it came on. Then it did the thing that took the last of my nerve. It tilted its head, slow, to one side. I knew that tilt. It was my own, the small thing my head does when I am working a hard problem, and the skull was doing it back at me. I had been on that mountain a season by then, or a night, or 7 years. I could not have said which anymore. I had driven down to the town in the valley more than once, and the people there had called me by my name before I opened my mouth, and told me I had kept this place for years, and gone quiet and careful, when I swore I had come only weeks before. I had found the rest of them in the old newspapers at the library, the men who kept the place ahead of me, one gone every 7 years, further back than the town liked to talk about. Every one of them had my build. Every one of them near enough had my face. And the thing coming across the open ground at me had once worn a face like theirs, under the bone. By morning the town down the valley would go on saying my name and meaning it, and the man they meant would not be me. Its jaw came open, past where the bone should stop, wider than a jaw is built to go, and out of it came a sound I had heard my first night in that house. It started like a wolf. It ended like a man. Then it came at me. It did not run. It did not have to run. It came in long, low strides that ate the ground between us, and I turned and ran for the house through the black timber with a rifle in my hands that might as well have been a length of pipe. I made it to the house that night. That was not the same as getting away. The email sat in my inbox 3 days before I opened it. The subject line said property management opportunity, competitive compensation, and I had learned by then that competitive compensation meant $9 an hour and a name tag. So, my thumb was already on the trash when I saw the sender, Elias Thorne Holdings. The name did not mean anything to me then, but the whole address did not look like the others. It did not have the desperate hungry look of the ones that wanted me to sell knives or drive for an app in a town with 4 stoplights. I was bored, and boredom in a man who is broke is its own kind of danger. I opened it. I had been out of work the better part of a year by then. I had guided elk hunts and pack trips and drop camps out of a little outfit near Pinedale, Wyoming for 11 years, and the outfit had gone under the way those outfits go under. The owner's heart quitting on him on a switchback trail at 61, with a client's horse spooking behind him, and after that there was nothing. Wyoming winters are long, and they are not kind to a man with a truck payment and a bad knee and no work. By February my savings had dropped to a number I did not like to look at. I looked at it anyway, most nights, the way a man keeps working a sore tooth with his tongue just to be sure it still hurts. Mr. Coburn, the email said, your experience in backcountry management and self-sufficiency has been brought to my attention. I own a substantial property in northwestern Montana, requiring on-site maintenance and security. The position offers considerable compensation for a 6-month commitment beginning immediately. Then it gave the number. I read the number twice. Then I got up and I got a beer out of the refrigerator, a warm one, because the refrigerator had been dying for a month and I could not afford to be angry at it. And I sat back down and I read the number a 3rd time. It was more than I would clear in 2 years of the kind of work I could actually get. It was the kind of money that fixes things. My daughter Emma was 11. She lived with her mother in Bozeman, and I sent what I could when I could, which was not enough and never on time. There was a version of that number where I could send more than enough, and on time for a long while, where Emma could have whatever an 11-year-old was supposed to have that I did not know about because I was not there. The email went on, and this was where it got strange. The property is remote, it said, requiring complete self-sufficiency. Outside contact will be limited to weekly email reports to my office. You must arrive alone and remain on the property for the duration of your contract. Hunting is permitted within property boundaries to supplement provided supplies. I read that part slower. I replied with my resume attached, half of me expecting to never hear back, the way a man buys a lottery ticket and shoves it up in the visor and forgets it on purpose, so he does not have to feel stupid about it later. Within the hour, Thorne wrote back. He had a contract ready. He had property specifications ready. It was as if the whole thing had been sitting on his desk waiting for me to say yes, which I would think about a great deal later, in the dark, when thinking about it could not do me any good. The place was 500 acres of private land in the northwest corner of the state, up against National Forest, back in the country west of Hungry Horse, where the Swan Range comes down hard and the roads give up. The house had generator power and a well, and satellite internet that would carry email and nothing else, and a pantry the contract described as fully provisioned. There were outbuildings. There was a lake to the north. There were hunting zones marked in green on a map and property boundaries marked in red, and I remember thinking that was a lot of red for a piece of ground a man was only supposed to keep the leaves off of. The contract terms were specific, and they were odd. 6 months without leaving the property. No visitors. Weekly reports required. Equipment maintenance on a schedule. Boundaries to be walked and maintained. It read like a mix of house sitting and guard duty, with the guard part underlined in a way I could not have pointed to but felt. I printed it on the little printer that only printed in gray, and I read it twice with the warm beer, and nothing in it was against the law that I could see, though the confidentiality sections went on and on and on. Half the money would wire the moment I signed. The other half would come when the 6 months were up. And here was the thing that decided me, sitting there at my own kitchen table with the linoleum peeling up in the corner by the stove. Even if I walked off that mountain halfway through, even if I quit in a month, I would still be further ahead than I had been in years. I called my sister Nora before I signed. She is the one in the family who reads the fine print, who calls the airline back to make sure, who has never once in her life bounced a check. I told her about it, careful, keeping the details vague the way the contract said I had to. It sounds too good to be true, she said. She had a way of saying things flat that used to make me want to argue just to hear her not budge. Maybe, I said. But the company checks out. I looked them up. Real estate all over the middle of the country. Commercial buildings in Chicago. Some resort thing in Michigan. And they want you to go live alone in the woods for 6 months, she said. What exactly are you guarding, Wade? I laughed. Some rich man's empty cabin. The property taxes alone are probably more than the house I grew up in. Send me the exact location before you leave, she said, and she was not laughing. And you call me when you can. I will email you, I said, and I did not tell her about the part where email was going to be the only thing I had. After I hung up with Nora, I sat a while and thought about Emma, which I did not let myself do often because it did not lead anywhere good. She was 11 and she lived in Bozeman with her mother and a man named Greg, who sold insurance and was by every account I could stand to hear decent to her. I had not been decent to her mother, not at the end. I had been gone, is what I had been. 3 weeks out of 4 on a mountain with somebody else's clients, while my own family learned to set the table for 2. By the time I understood that being a good provider and being a father were not the same job, the job had been filled by a man who sold insurance. I saw Emma 4 times a year. If the money and the roads and her mother's patience all lined up, which they did not always do, the last time was in the spring. I took her for pancakes at a place off the interstate, and she told me about a science fair project on the phases of the moon, a foam ball painted half black. She explained the whole of it to me across the syrup, her serious little face working. I understood about a third of it and nodded at all of it. When I dropped her back, she hugged me around the middle, quick, the way a child hugs a thing she is not sure will be there the next time, and went inside. I owed on the child support. Not a lot, but enough that it sat on me. That number Thorne had put in the email was the number that made the sitting stop. That is most of why a careful man stops being careful, not greed. A foam ball painted half black, and a girl who hugs a man like she is saying goodbye. That night I signed it. I scanned the pages on my phone and sent them back to the office address in Chicago, and 20 minutes later my phone buzzed on the counter with a banking alert, and the first payment was already sitting in my account. More zeros than I was used to seeing, that were not owed to somebody. I sat and looked at it for a while. I want to say I felt lucky. Mostly I felt the way a man feels when a door swings open onto a room he cannot see into and he steps through it anyway, because the hall he has been standing in has gone cold. I packed the truck the next morning. I took my time about it, because a man who has done a lot of backcountry work learns that the time saved rushing the load is the time lost digging for a buried thing at the bottom of it in the rain. My rifle and my old pump shotgun, extra ammunition for both. Fishing gear, though it was too late in the year for much. Tools, because a place that remote, a man fixes a thing himself, or does without it. Winter clothes, good boots. The heavy wool I had bought back when I could afford good wool. Enough canned food to add to whatever was up there already, because I have been hungry in the woods once, and I did not care to do it twice. Books, since there would be no Netflix on an email-only line. A real first aid kit, the kind with a suture set in it, and the pills I take for the knee. There is no drugstore where I was going. There is no anything. The drive north out of Wyoming took me up through country I knew, and then across into Montana where it started to change. The mountains stood up taller. The trees came in thicker and darker and closer to the road. I had spent most of my grown life in the mountains, and I did not scare in them. But somewhere past Missoula, I got a feeling I did not have a name for, a low hum under the breastbone. I caught myself looking at a mountain off to the west, a particular broken shape of it against the sky, and thinking that I had seen it before, that I knew the next bend of the river before it came. I said it out loud in the cab. That is strange, just to hear a voice, and the feeling let go of me as fast as it had come, and I told myself it was the excitement of new work and new money and a man's mind filling in the blanks. That is what a mind does. It fills in the blanks. I would learn that it fills them in with whatever is handy, and that whatever is handy is not always the truth. The coordinates took me toward the western edge of the country, up near Glacier, down roads that got narrower and lonelier the farther I went. Cell service quit about an hour past Missoula and did not come back. By late afternoon, I hit Kalispell, the last real town before the turnoff, and I pulled into a big outfitter store on the edge of it to make one more supply run before the ground swallowed me. Inside, I loaded a cart, more ammunition, batteries, because a place on generator power eats batteries, more food that would keep, better winter gear than what I had, because Montana in the deep of the year is a different animal than Wyoming, and I respect the difference. The man at the register was old, and he had the leathered look of somebody who had spent his life outdoors and did not regret a day of it, and he made the small talk that men like that make while he rang me up. Quite a haul, he said, looking over the cart. You headed up for the late hunt. Not exactly, I said, taking a caretaking job up past Hungry Horse, managing a property for the season. His hand slowed on the register. It was a small thing. If I had not been looking right at them, I would have missed it. The Thorne place, he said. I looked up from my wallet, surprised. Yeah, actually, you know it. Something went across his face, and then it was gone, folded away somewhere, and he finished ringing up my things without looking at me again. He put the last box in the bag, and he set the bag on the counter, and he kept his hand on it a second longer than he needed to. Been through a lot of caretakers, that property, he said. What do you mean by that? I said. He shrugged, and he was already looking past me to the next person in line, a woman with a little girl hanging off the cart, and whatever door had opened in him had shut. Just saying, he said. People don't tend to stay long. I carried the bags out to the truck. I told myself every little town has its stories. Every big empty place has the local legend that the old-timers trot out for anybody green enough to listen. I had heard 100 of them guiding. The lake that takes a swimmer every summer. The stretch of trail where the dog will not go. It is a way of talking, is all. a way of making the country feel like it belongs to a man because he knows its ghosts. I checked my directions and I pulled back out onto the road and I drove for the mountains. And I did not think about the old man again for a while, which is its own kind of mistake. The afternoon wore down. The road turned to gravel, and then the gravel got bad, and it climbed up into the trees in switchbacks that doubled back on themselves, so that the sun kept swinging from one side of the cab to the other. And my truck labored on the steep pitches, the engine working, the tires loose on the grade. The pines crowded right up to the shoulder. Branches raked the windows where the road pinched down. I went nearly 3 hours from Kalispell on roads that got worse and lonelier, and I did not pass a single other vehicle, not one. And then I came around a last long bend, and there it was. The Thorn place. The house stood with the black wall of the forest behind it and the broken mountain slopes above that, bigger than I had built it in my head. Rustic mountain-style, heavy timber, a wide-covered porch, the kind of place a rich man builds when he wants the woods to know he can afford them. And it was kept. That was the first thing that did not sit right, though it took me a minute to name it. For a property that supposedly needed a caretaker, it did not look like it needed anything. The gravel drive was raked. The path to the door was trimmed and clear. The firewood along the south wall was stacked in a rick so square and true it could have been a photograph. I sat in the truck a moment with the engine ticking, and I looked at that woodpile, and a cold quiet came up in me, the way it used to on a hunt when the woods went wrong and I could not yet say how. I cut the engine. The silence came down like a lid. There was the tick of the cooling motor and, far off, a bird. One bird. And nothing else. I got my bag and the keys Thorne had couriered to my place in Wyoming, a heavy old ring of them in a padded envelope with no note, and I stepped out. The air was colder than Kalispell had been, and it smelled of pine and cold water, and under that, faint, a cellar smell I did not chase down then, like ground that never gets the sun. I stood in the drive, and I looked at how neat it all was, how tended, and I thought, somebody has been taking care of this place just fine, so what do they need me for? The front door opened on a solid, well-oiled click. I stepped in, and my boots came down on hardwood so polished it threw the gray afternoon light back up at me, and the inside of that house stopped me flat because the inside did not match the outside at all. Outside it was all rough timber and mountain charm. Inside it was money. High ceilings with the beams exposed, but the beams framed recessed lighting and clean modern fixtures. A long leather sectional facing a stone fireplace with bookshelves built in on both sides, hard covers, match sets, the spines uncracked. A kitchen open to the main room, granite and steel, cooking equipment better than any restaurant I had ever eaten in. Art on the walls that I did not understand and knew without understanding was worth more than my truck. Not exactly roughing it, I said out loud, and my voice went up into all that space and came back small. On the island in the kitchen there was a thick binder with property management printed down the spine, and beside it a sealed envelope with my name on it in a good hand, real ink. I opened the envelope first. The note inside was short and typed. Mr. Coburn, welcome to the property. Everything you need is in the manual. Remember our agreement. Complete isolation, weekly reports, boundaries maintained. The pantry and the freezer are stocked. Hunting zones are on the maps. Your first report is due in 7 days. Elias Thorne. It was as flat as every email he had sent me. I set it down and opened the binder. Inside it was all business, and all thorough. Maintenance schedules by the day and by the season, emergency procedures, a full workup of the house systems, and maps, good maps. The property ran to nearly 500 acres of private land backed against the national forest, larger than I had understood from the listing. There were several outbuildings marked. There was the lake to the north. There were the hunting zones in green. And running all the way around the edge of it, all the way around, was a boundary line drawn heavy in red, with notes along it in a small, neat hand about keeping up the fences and the boundary markers. Keep the markers clear, one note said. Keep the line whole. I read that twice. Keep the line whole. It is the kind of thing a man writes about a fence. It did not read like it was about a fence. I spent what was left of the daylight getting my gear in and checking the systems, because that is the work, and the work steadies me. The generator sat in a small outbuilding 50 yards off the house, a good automatic model with fuel tanks nearly full and a maintenance log on a nail beside it that showed it had been serviced 2 weeks back. The water came off a well with a real filtration setup, and there again everything was fresh, new filters, the chemicals lined up on a shelf with their labels all turned to face out. Somebody careful had stood right here not long ago. The satellite gear on the roof showed good signal. Back inside, I tried my phone out of habit and there was nothing. No bars. The little spinning circle giving up. I turned on the computer in the small office off the main room. It found the internet, but when I opened a browser, it gave me a message about limited connectivity and would go no further. Email came through. Nothing else did. Just as Thorne had said. I wrote to Nora. Made it to the property, I typed. It is fancier than I expected. No cell service like they warned me. And the internet is email only, so this is the only way I can reach out. Do not worry if you do not hear from me for a stretch. Everything is fine here. Love you, Wade. I read it over and I sent it, and the little bar crawled across the screen and told me it had gone, and I felt better for it, the way a rope makes a man feel better even when he is not hanging on it yet. By the time I had my supplies squared away, the day was going. I made a simple supper and carried it out to the back deck that looked down the slope into the trees. The land fell away easy from the house, and then the forest took it, and beyond the forest the mountains stood with the last gold light catching their peaks and draining off them while I sat there. It was beautiful. I will give it that, for whatever it is worth now. It was beautiful, and I sat there with my plate and let the cold come up around me and thought that maybe, for once, a thing had broken my way. That was when the woods went quiet. They had been full of sound. Birds settling, the small rustle of things in the undergrowth, the ordinary busy noise of a forest going to sleep, and then it stopped. It did not fade. It stopped, and it stopped in a line, a wave of silence that came across the trees from the east side of the property to the west, rolling like a hand laid flat across guitar strings, killing the noise as it went. I stood up with the plate still in my hand. Down in the open ground below the deck, where the grass ran to the tree line before the forest took over, a knot of deer broke from the trees all at once. They ran flat out across the open, no bounding, no looking back, just running the way deer run from fire. And they were gone into the far trees in seconds. I stood and looked hard at the place they had come from. Nothing came out after them. No cat, no wolf, no bear rolling out of the brush. Nothing. The woods stayed dead quiet, and the quiet had a weight to it, a pressure, like the air before a storm that never comes, and I stood there until the cold drove me in, and even inside, with the door shut and locked behind me, the quiet stayed in my ears. I spent that evening going through the house, room by room, telling myself I was learning the place, and knowing it was fear that kept me moving, checking closets, looking in the basement, which held a workshop and a wine cellar cut into the rock, reading deeper into the manual. And the whole time I could not shake the sense of being watched, and I kept catching myself turning to the big black windows that faced the woods, where the deck light threw a little yellow out into the dark, and the dark ate it a few feet from the glass. When I finally went up to the master bedroom, the long drive should have put me under the second my head touched the pillow. Instead, I lay on my back and listened to a house I did not know yet. The hum of the refrigerator down below, the tick and settle of the timber, the soft breath of the heat coming on. I was almost down, almost gone, when the sound came through the night and pulled me straight back up out of it. It was somewhere between a howl and a scream, far off, but clear enough to sit up for. In my ears guiding, I had heard wolves sing, and I had heard a cougar in the dark make a noise like a woman being killed, and I had heard bull elk bugle in the rut until the sound stopped meaning anything. This was none of them. It was higher. It bent in the middle in a way an animal's voice does not bend. There was a note in it that was trying to be a word and could not find one, and it climbed and then cut off clean all at once, as if a door had shut on it. I got up and went to the window. The exterior lights lit the ground close in around the house, and past that there was nothing, a black so complete it looked solid. No shine of eyes, no shape. I stood at the glass and waited, and the sound did not come again, and after a while sleep was a thing that had happened to somebody else. I got the rifle out of the case, checked it loaded, and set it against the nightstand where my hand would find it. Then I walked the whole house again, and put my hand on every lock. The manual had mentioned the wildlife the way any manual would: bears, lions, wolves, standard precautions, nothing more. The house had a lot of sounds in it once I started listening for them. The refrigerator came on and shut off. The heat ticked in the baseboards. Timber settled somewhere over my head. A slow crack, then nothing. None of it was the sound from the woods. I told myself that more than once. A house this size breathes. That is all a house does at night. But there is a difference between a sound a place makes and a sound that is made at a place, and the body knows the difference before the mind will say it out loud. I lay there with my eyes open in the dark. I found myself counting the gaps between the noises, waiting to hear if anything moved in the gaps. Nothing did. That was almost worse. I lay back down with the rifle an arm's length away, and I did not so much fall asleep as get taken under, sometime after 3 a.m, down into thin dreams of running through trees that did not end. Morning came up gray and ordinary through the bedroom windows and made a liar of the night. In the daylight, the whole thing seemed like the mind of a tired man in a strange house. I made coffee in that expensive kitchen and carried it outside to walk the near ground, and that is when I saw them. Tracks. In the soft mud near the tree line, maybe 50 yards off the house. I walked out to them with the coffee going cold in my hand, and I crouched down over them, and the coffee did not matter anymore. I had cut sign my whole working life. I could tell a black bear from a grizz at a glance, a cat from a dog by the claw, a walking elk from a running one. I had never seen anything like these. They were too big for anything that lives in those woods, each one near 15 inches from heel to toe, and the shape was wrong in a way that put a cold hand flat on the back of my neck. They were laid out almost like a man's foot, that same long arch, that same heel, but the toes ran out too long and ended in gouges dug deep into the mud where claws had bitten in and pulled. The stride between them was enormous. Whatever had made them had covered ground I could not have jumped, step after step, and had not been hurrying to do it. I followed them with my eyes and then with my feet. They came out of the forest from the north. They ran a long, slow circle around the house, keeping their distance, staying just at the edge of the trees, and then they went back the way they had come, north, into the timber. Whatever had walked here in the dark had walked all the way around the place I was sleeping in, and had looked at it from every side, and had gone home. I stood at the edge of the woods with the dead coffee in my hand, and I looked into the trees where the tracks went, and I did not have one single explanation for what I was looking at. And I thought about emailing Thorne. I got as far as the office. I sat down at the computer, and I did not do it. The reason was small and stupid and human, and it shames me a little to give it. I did not want to look like a man who spooked. First day on the job, a fat contract signed, and here I was ready to write the boss about scary footprints in the mud. I could hear how it would read. So instead, I got my camera and I went back out and I photographed the tracks from every angle, close up with my knife laid beside one for scale, because documentation is what a professional does, I told myself. And I could put it in the first weekly report if the thing came back. That is what I told myself. What I truly wanted was a reason to be out there in the daylight, looking hard at the ground instead of inside looking at that black wall of trees. The days after that went into the work, and the work was real even if nothing else was. I learned the generator's moods. I ran the well pump through its cycle and logged the numbers the manual wanted logged. I walked the property lines, or the near ones, following the red blazes painted on the trees where the manual said the boundary ran, and I carried the rifle slung across my back the whole time, and I told myself it was for bears. The blazes were fresh. That stayed with me. Paint on a tree. Out in that weather goes chalky and dull in a season. It flakes off in a few. These were wet-looking and bright red, laid on thick, and not long ago, every one of them. Mile after mile of a boundary that no one but me had walked in who knew how long. Somebody had gone all the way around 500 acres with a bucket of red paint, and recently. And then that somebody was gone, and here I was. There was an outbuilding down toward the lake the manual called the Old Quarters, and I went into it on the third or fourth day looking for a spare fuel can, and I stayed longer than the errand because of what was in it. It was a bunkhouse, one room, a wood stove, and a cot, and a table and a shelf, the kind of place a hired man lives when the main house is for the owner. Somebody had lived in it a long time. The cot had a blanket folded on it, army square. There was a coffee cup on the table, washed and set upside down to dry, dust in it now. And there was a coat on a peg by the door, a canvas work coat gone soft with wear, and without thinking I took it down and put it on the way a man tries on a thing in an empty room, and it fit me. It fit me the way a coat fits. After 10 years of being yours, broke in at the elbows, exactly where I break in an elbow. The cuffs worn through on the right sleeve, where I wear a cuff through, favoring that hand. I took it off fast and hung it back on the peg and stood there, not liking the feel of my own arms. The shelf had a few paperbacks swollen from the damp, and above the shelf someone had scratched into the log wall, small, the way a man passes time. Initials. Sets of them, a dozen or more, cut at different depths and different ages, some gone dark with years and some pale and new, running along the log in a row like marks counting something. A J and an M, an S and an O, and down at the end of the row, in wood that was still pale, still fresh, the cut edges of it not yet gone gray, a W and a C. I stood and looked at my own initials in that wall for a long time. I had not cut them. I was sure I had not cut them, as sure as I was of anything. I put my thumb in the grooves. They were the right depth for a pocket knife, the right size for my hand. By the door, a calendar was tacked up, a feed store calendar with a bird on it, same as the one in the store. The days were crossed off in black pen, up to a date, a week back, one clean X through each square. The hand that made the last few X's slanted its lines, the way my hand slants. I went out of that bunkhouse. I did not go back into it again if I could help it. I got in the habit of drawing the curtains before dark. All of them, every window on the ground floor, the big black glass that looked out into the trees. I built a fire in the stone hearth every night and kept it going. I sat near it with one of the uncracked books. I read the same page 4 and 5 times and did not take in a word of it, because my ears were doing all the work my eyes pretended to. The sound came most nights, that far-off broken howl, once or twice, always after full dark, sometimes near and sometimes so far it might have been the wind if the wind had a throat. And most mornings there were tracks, not always the wide circle of that first night. Sometimes just a few, come out of the north and stopped a while at the edge of the trees, where the ground was pressed down deep like something had stood there a long time, facing the house, and then turned and gone back, always facing the house. Whatever it was did not wander through. It came and it watched and it left and it did the same thing the next night, the way a man works up to a thing he means to do. The days did not come one clean day after the next. The thing in the trees was outside of me, and I could point a rifle at it. What began happening in those days was inside me, and there was nothing to point at. Somewhere in that first stretch, the days stopped adding up. It came on small. I went to the woodpile one morning, and it was fuller than I had left it, the rick built back up square and true, and I stood there and could not remember splitting it, though my hands had the ache in them that splitting leaves. I found a meal's worth of dishes drying in the rack that I did not remember eating off of. One afternoon I came to on the back deck, the cold deep in me, the light gone long and gold. I could not have named the last thing before that. Only that a moment ago it had been morning and my coffee had been hot. Now the cup in my hand was cold clear through, a skin on top of the coffee. And my boots, when I looked down at them, were caked to the ankle in black mud, though I had not walked anywhere I could name. I sat there and my heart went hard and slow. I told myself a man alone loses the thread. No talk, no radio, no other face. The mind drifts. I had seen it in clients on long trips, the way a day in the deep country can fold in on itself. That is what I told myself. But a client drifting still knows what day it is when he comes back, and I was starting not to. I decided to go to town. I told myself it was for supplies, and I did need a few honest things, more batteries, a better first aid kit than the one I had, a couple of tools for the outside work. But under the errand was the real reason. I could not stand another day alone with the folding of the hours. I wanted to see a face that was not mine in a mirror. I wanted a stranger to say a thing to me and have it be a normal thing so I could believe in normal things again. The manual and a road map in the office drawer showed the nearest town, a little place called Ledger, about 20 miles down out of the mountains. I put my wallet in my back pocket, took the keys, and went. The morning was clean and cold. The woods along the drive were only woods, birds in them, a squirrel crossing the gravel ahead of the tires. By the time I hit the county road, I had talked myself most of the way back to a man on his way to buy batteries. Ledger was not much. A wide spot where the road remembered how to be a street for a few hundred yards. A general store with 2 gas pumps out front, a post office the size of a shed, a diner at the far end with a chrome strip along the front of it, a handful of trucks and old cars nosed in along the curb. I pulled in at the store, cut the engine, sat a second in the quiet. Then I went in. A bell rang over the door. The inside smelled of coffee and floor oil and cardboard, the good ordinary smell of a place where people buy the things they need, and I could have stood in it an hour just for that. A woman behind the counter looked up. She had dark auburn hair pulled back and a friendly, weathered face, and when she saw me, her whole face opened up like she was glad, like I was expected. "Wade Coburn," she said. "Back already." She smiled and shook her head at me. "I figured you for Thursday, same as always." I stopped in the middle of the floor. There was a beat where the words did not fit together, where I actually looked behind me to see if there was another man come in at my back. There was not. I had never been in that store. I had never in my life laid eyes on that woman, and she had said my whole name before I had said a word. "I'm sorry," I said, and I heard my own voice go careful. "Have we met?" The smile flickered, just a flicker, at the edges. "Very funny," she said, though it was not a question, and there was a small worry starting to work into it. "You've been coming in here for, well, years now." She looked harder at my face. "Wade, you feeling all right?" "I only got here a few days ago," I said, and I kept my voice level the way a man keeps it level walking a spooked horse. "This is my first time in Ledger. I signed on with Thorne last week." I was aware of the store around me. An old man over by the fishing tackle had turned to look. A middle-aged woman by the canned goods had stopped with a can in her hand, and the man by the tackle, gray, in a canvas coat, nodded at me like we were old acquaintance. "Coburn," he said. "Good to see you out. You ever have any luck with those night spots I put you on to, down on the creek?" I had never seen them before. Not once. My mouth was dry. The woman behind the counter was Marion. Her name was painted on a little wooden sign by the register, Pruitt's. I would learn she was Marion Pruitt, that her people had run that store since before the road was paved, but right then she was just a stranger who knew me, and she gave a small laugh that had no bottom in it. "Wade, you're carrying on," she said. "You've been the caretaker up at the Thorne place for as long as I've been standing behind this counter. You buy the same things every week. Coffee. Those batteries for your weather station. The jerky." Her eyes went to the calendar on the wall behind her and came back, quick, like she had not meant to look and could not help it. The woman by the canned goods spoke up. "You helped my boy," she said, "when his car quit on the pass last winter. You do not remember that, Mr. Coburn." The floor did not move, but it felt like it moved. That tilt of stepping off a boat onto a dock, the ground lying under my feet. These people were not putting me on. That was the thing I could not climb over. There was no joke in it. They believed it, all of them, the way a man believes his own address, and their believing it was changing the air in that room. "I think there has been some kind of mix-up," I said. "I got here the 5th of October. I signed the contract the week before that. Marion's face changed then. The gladness went out of it, and a careful look came into it, and she looked again at the calendar, longer this time, and I followed her eyes to it. It was one of those free calendars the feed store gives out, a bird painting up top, the month below in a grid, and there was a little mark on one of the squares, a small circle inked in, a few days out. I did not know yet what the circle meant. Well, she said, and she pulled the brightness back over her face like a sheet drawn over a shape in a bed. Memory plays tricks on everybody. What can I get you today, Wade? I wanted to push it. I could feel the questions stacking up behind my teeth, but the others had gone back to their shopping, or made a show of it. I did not want to be the man who made a scene in the only store for 20 miles. So I got what I had come for, the batteries, and the tools, and the first aid kit, and a few other things, and I brought them to the counter. Marion rang me up quick and quiet, the warmth gone now, replaced with a politeness that would not meet my eye. That comes to 43 and change, she said. I gave her a card. While it ran, she leaned in a little, and she dropped her voice under the noise of the cooler, so low I almost lost it. You want to be gone before the full moon, she said. It is not too late this time. You still have the days. Before I could ask her what in God's name that meant, she straightened up and handed me back my card and my receipt with a store clerk's smile bolted over her whole face. You have a good one now, she said, loud, for the room. I carried the bags out into the light, with my head full of noise. When I got to the truck, the old man in the canvas coat had come out and was leaning against the store wall, and he pushed off it when he saw me and came over. He had a white mustache gone yellow at the edges and a face like a dry creek bed, and he did not offer his hand. Coburn, he said. Got a minute? I did not, but I nodded, because a man that age in a town that small might be the only one who would tell me a straight thing. Wendell Barr, he said, like the name ought to land somewhere in me. It did not. He studied my face while it did not. How's the situation up at the Thorn place, he said. What situation? I said. He took a half step back. Something moved behind his eyes, and it was not confusion. It was the opposite of confusion. It was a man watching a thing he had seen before come around again on schedule. You really do not remember, he said, quiet, more to himself than to me. He shook his head. Sorry to trouble you. My mistake. And he turned and walked off up the street with his hands in his coat, and left me standing there with the bags cutting into my fingers. I did not get in the truck and drive. I was rattled and I was hungry, and I did not want to make the long climb back up the mountain on an empty stomach with my head doing what it was doing. So I walked down to the diner at the end of the street to get some food in me and put a floor back under myself. Inside it was warm and half full. A few men at the counter, a couple of families in the booths, the good clatter of forks and low talk. I took an empty booth at the back and set my bags on the seat beside me. A young waitress came over with a pot of coffee and a mug and set the mug down in front of me and filled it without my asking. Hey, Wade, she said. Her name tag said June. She had a nice easy way about her, the usual. I looked at the tag and I looked at her face, and there was nothing there for me, no memory, just a friendly stranger pouring coffee into a life I had never lived. What would my usual be? I said, and I tried to make it light, and it did not come out light. She laughed. You are a piece of work today. Denver omelet, hash browns burnt the way you like them, sourdough, same as every Thursday for, 5 years? Her smile went when she got a good look at me. Wade, you okay? You look gray. I have never been in here before, I said, and it came out harder than I wanted, hard enough that she stepped back half a pace. But you come in every Thursday, she said, and now she was not smiling at all, and her voice had gone small and unsure. You sit in this booth, you take your coffee black, you read the paper, and you leave a $5 tip no matter what you had. Her eyes were wide. You always leave 5. I put my hand flat on the table to keep it still. What is today's date? I said. She pointed to a little calendar taped up by the register without taking her eyes off me. I looked. Then I took out my phone and woke it up and looked at that too. because I did not trust the wall and the phone said the same thing, and the thing they said opened a hole in the floor of me. It was the 17th of October. I had signed the contract the last week of September. I had driven up and turned the key in that front door on the 5th. I had counted the 5th off in my head twice on the drive because I liked knowing my start date, the first day of the money, the first day of the new thing, the 5th. And here was the world telling me 12 days had gone by since then, and I could account for maybe 4 of them, 5 if I was generous with myself, and the rest were just gone, spent by somebody wearing my body while I was not home behind my own eyes. I have to go, I said, and I stood up too fast and my knee caught the underside of the table and the coffee jumped and slopped over the rim. Wade, are you sick? Do you want me to call? I'm fine, I said. I am fine. I just have to go. I put a bill on the table, more than the food. I did not look at how much, and I took my bags and I got out of there with the bell going behind me and the eyes of the whole room on my back. I sat in the truck in the gravel lot and held the wheel with both hands and made myself breathe. 12 days. I went through my phone like it was evidence, and in a way it was. My last outgoing call was to Nora, and it was dated the 4th of October, the day before I drove up, and there was nothing after it, no calls, no texts, because there had been no service to make them on. 12 days on that mountain, and the only proof I had been alive for any of it was a woodpile. I did not remember splitting in mud on my boots. I did not remember walking through in a whole town that remembered years of a man who had my face. The drive back was a smear. Twice I took a turn I knew was right and found myself somewhere wrong and had to double back on a road that had a fork in it maybe once the whole way, and I did not think much of it then, and I would think a great deal of it later. It was near dark when I came around the last bend, and the house stood there waiting for me with the trees black behind it. I brought the bags in, and I did not stop to put them away. I went straight to the office and sat down at the computer, because if 12 days had passed, then 12 days of the man who had my life had passed too, and I wanted to know what he had been doing while I was gone. I opened the mail. I went to the sent folder. There were 2 reports there I had never written. The first was dated the 8th of October. The second was dated the 15th. Both were to Thorne's office. Both were long, careful, exactly the kind of report I would write if I were writing one, in exactly the plain, flat way I write, and I read my own words about work I had no memory of doing. I had repaired a run of shake shingles on the north roof where wind had gotten under them. I had cleared deadfall and brushback off the boundary line in the northeast quarter to keep the markers clear. I had tracked what I believed to be a large elk through the north timber and lost it near the lake and would watch for it again. Weather noted. Systems noted. Signed, Wade Coburn, in the way I sign things. I sat back in that leather chair in the dark office and my skin was cold all over, that crawling cold that comes up from underneath. I read them again. There was nothing wrong with them. That was the wrong of them. They were competent and calm, and mine, written in my hand by a version of me who slept when I did not sleep and worked when I do not remember, working and reported to the boss right on schedule while I lost whole days off the back of the calendar like cards off the bottom of a deck. I got up and I went and dug my little field notebook out of my duffel, the waterproof one I carry for waypoints and shot notes, and I sat down at the kitchen island under the one light. And I wrote the date at the top of a clean page, the 17th of October. Then I wrote down everything I could still hold of what had happened since I drove up, in order, hard as I could. The tracks, the sound, the folding days, the town, the reports, all of it. Because if my own mind was going to keep spending days without me, then I would at least have a record that was ink and not memory, one that could not be quietly rewritten behind my eyes. Then I tore a blank sheet out of the back, and I wrote on it in big block letters, check the date, write in the book every night, and I went up and taped it to the bathroom mirror, where I would have to look at it. Then I stood there a while, looking at my own face over the top of the note, in the good clean light of that expensive bathroom. I studied my face the way a man studies a face he is not sure he can trust, and my face studied me back and gave nothing away. I did not sleep much that night, and what sleep I got, I fought for. And in the morning, the note was still on the mirror, and the date on my phone had held the 18th, one honest day, laid end to end with the day before it, and that small thing steadied me enough to think. The town remembered a man who had been the caretaker for years. The reports remembered work I had not done. If any of that had a bottom to it, the bottom was not going to be in Thorne's tidy binder of maintenance schedules. It was going to be in the town's own memory, the written down kind, the kind that does not get quietly changed behind a man's eyes in the night. So I drove back down to Ledger, and I did not stop at the store or the diner. There was a library at the end of a side street off the main drag, a low building with a faded green front and a hand-painted sign, and I had seen it the day before without seeing it. Inside it was one long room, shelves down the walls, 3 old computers on a table in the middle, and a woman at a desk near the door with gray hair and thick glasses who looked up at me when the door closed. "Help you," she said, and that was all. No name, no gladness. She did not know me, and I could have kissed her for it. "I am looking for local history," I said. "Anything on the Thorne property, up past Hungry Horse?" She nodded like it was the most ordinary request in the world and pointed to a door at the back. "Local archive is through there. Papers going back to the beginning of the town, county records, the like. Sign the book before you go in." There was a leather guest book on a stand. I signed my name. Above mine there were only 3 other names in the last month, and I looked at that a moment. 3 names in a month, and went in. The archive room smelled of old paper and dust and cold radiator metal. Bound volumes of the county paper filled one wall of shelves, the years stamped in gold on the spines. There was a machine in the corner for reading film that looked like it belonged in a museum. I started with the newspapers, pulling the oldest bound volumes first, and I found the first mention of the property fast, because a thing like that was news in a town like that. It was from the spring of 1903. A short piece, proud, the way small papers used to be, proud of anything that meant money coming in. It announced the completion of a hunting lodge for a Chicago man named Josiah Thorne, built on 500 acres he had bought up in the high country, Elias Thorne's great-grandfather. The article said the lodge would bring seasonal work to the valley, and it thanked Mr. Thorne for his investment in the community, and I sat there and thought, all right, a rich family's hunting lodge, over 100 years old. Nothing strange in that. I went forward through the years, and in a volume from the fall of 1910, I found the thing that put the first real cold into me, tucked between an advertisement for liver pills and a notice about a church social, 3 lines of small print. Caretaker missing. Authorities have called off the search for John Merrow, caretaker of the Thorne hunting property, missing since the 26th of October. Merrow, 32, was last seen in town on the 20th of October, buying supplies. Mr. Thorne has announced that a new caretaker will take up residence before winter. I read it 3 times. Then I kept turning pages, faster, and the pattern came up out of the paper at me like a face rising up out of dark water. The autumn of 1917. Samuel Ott, caretaker of the Thorne estate, presumed dead after failing to come down for his winter supply. A new man named to the post. The autumn of 1924. The caretaker before that written off, at last 7 years gone, and another put in his place. It went on that way down through the century, the wording changing with the times, but the bones of it never changing at all. Every 7 years, near enough to count on. A caretaker of the Thorne place goes missing. The town looks, or says it looks, the search is called off. A new caretaker takes up residence before the snow, and every one of them, every single one, went missing in the back half of October. My hands were not steady on the pages. I got to the volumes from the last few decades, and there the paper started running photographs, small and gray and grainy, of the new men as they came in. 1995, 2002, 2009. They did not look exactly alike, those men. I sat there and made myself study each gray face for a long time, and then I studied it again because the first look had not wanted to be true. They were all of a type, all of them my height and my build, near enough, all of them dark-haired, all of them light-eyed. Men who, with the right coat and the right haircut and a bad photocopy of a newspaper photo, could each of them have been me, different men, the same man. I could not hold both of those at once, and I could not let go of either. And then I found the last one, and I stopped being able to breathe right for a while. It was only a few years old, the newest clipping in the newest volume. Local men and women, it said, the caption under a grainy photo, and the little article was about the Thorne family keeping up the old property even as Elias Thorne ran his business back in Chicago. And it said the day-to-day was seen to by the estate's caretaker of long standing. And it named the caretaker Wade Coburn. And the photograph over the caption was a man standing in front of that house, in front of the porch I had walked across 2 weeks or 2 years ago, squinting into the sun with his hand up to shade his eyes. And it was me. Not a man like me. Me. The set of my shoulders. The way I stand with my weight on my bad leg to spare the knee. My face. I sat back in that chair and the room went far away for a second and came back. According to the paper in my hands, I had been the caretaker of the Thorne property for 7 years. 7 years, this coming late October. But I had been in Wyoming. I had guided out of Pinedale 11 years. Lost the job the winter before. Answered an email at the end of the summer. I had a truck with Wyoming plates and a daughter in Bozeman, and a sister who would surely know if her brother had vanished into the Montana woods 7 years back and left a hole in the family where he used to be. Unless I got out my phone, I had no bars up on that mountain, but I was down in the valley now, in town, and there was one flickering bar. I found Nora in the contacts, and I called her, standing there in the dust, and the old paper smell. It rang, and I did not even know what I was going to say. It rang twice, 3 times, and then it went to her voicemail, her flat, sensible voice telling me to leave a message, and I stood there with the phone against my ear, and I did not know what I had wanted her to say that would have made this smaller. Nora, it's Wade, I said. I need you to call me back the second you get this. It's important. I need to know exactly when the two of us last saw each other in person. The real date. And I stopped and I made myself say the next part and it came out lower. And if you have got any pictures of us, anything recent, anything with me in it, will you send them, please? It matters. I hung up. I did not expect it to reach her, the way the service was, and even if it did, I was not sure I wanted to be there when the answer came. I took out the little notebook and got my camera and photographed every clipping, every year, the whole cursed staircase of them going down into the dark of that century. I signed out under 3 lonely names in a guest book. I thanked the woman at the desk who had never seen me before in her life. And I went back up the mountain, because there was nowhere else in the world that I had left to go. I did not have a plan by the time I got back up the mountain. What I had was a photographer's habit and a tracker's habit, and when a man is scared past the point of thinking, habit is the thing left to him, so I leaned on it. There was daylight left when I pulled in. I got the wildlife cameras out of my gear, the little motion trip cameras I had brought to catch game on a slow week, and never dreamed I would point at anything else. I set them around the house, one covering the drive, one on the north side, facing the trees the tracks kept coming from, one at the back, looking down the slope, 2 more along the near boundary. Then, because the daylight was going and I could not make myself sit in that house yet, I took the rifle and walked a stretch of the property line I had not walked before. Out to the northwest, where the manual's red boundary swung close to the house, maybe half a mile out, that is where I found the trees. They were the big ones, the old pines that had been there since before the lodge, and someone had carved into them. The first one I almost walked past. It was old work, gone gray and swollen at the edges, the way a scar on a tree goes with the years. But it was deep, cut deep on purpose, and it was a shape, a figure. A tall figure with too many limbs, the arms and legs of it drawn long and thin, and up off the head of it a spread of lines like antlers or like branches going up and out. My stomach dropped when I understood I had seen it already, that same shape. Without knowing I had seen it, it was cut into the tree facing in, facing the house. I walked the line and found another 30 yards on the same figure, facing in, and another. They ran all the way around, tree after tree, old and deep. Every one of them turned to face the house at the center, so that if a man stood at the house and could see through half a mile of timber in every direction, he would find himself standing in the middle of a ring of them, hundreds of them maybe, all looking in at him. I marked their places on my map, and I photographed them, and I got back to the house as the last light went, and I did a thing I should have done my first day. I wrote to Thorne. Not a report. I attached the photographs of the carvings, and I typed it plain, Mr. Thorne. I have found markings carved into the boundary trees all around the property. An old figure, deliberate, every one of them facing the house. I have also had time go missing that I cannot account for, and I have found in the county records a pattern of caretakers at this property going missing every 7 years, always in late October. I need you to tell me what I have signed on to. Please advise. I read it over and I sent it, and I watched the little bar crawl across and tell me it had gone. Then I sat in the dark office and waited for a reply the way a man waits for a verdict. None came. None of my reports had ever gotten more than 3 words back from him. Received. Good. Noted. I did not even get that. I made a fire, and I cleaned the rifle I had already cleaned, and I waited for dark to be over. It got full dark by 6 that time of year, the black coming down hard and complete, and I sat with the curtains drawn and the fire going, and I listened. For a long while there was nothing but the fire in the house. Then, near 2 by my watch, there came a sound from the wall by the front room window, a soft scratching, slow, patient, the sound a branch makes on siding in a wind, except there was no wind. The smoke off my own chimney had been going up straight as a plumb line at dusk, and this did not have the idleness of a branch. It moved. It went along the wall, slow, from the window toward the corner of the house, scratch and pause, and scratch like a single long claw dragged along the wood to feel the shape of the place, or to let me hear it doing so. I got the rifle and the flashlight, and I went window to window in the dark, keeping back from the glass, following the sound around the inside of the house while it went around the outside. At the kitchen it stopped. The silence after it was worse than the sound had been. And then, out on the gravel of the drive, I heard footsteps. They were not a man's footsteps. I have heard men walk on gravel all my life, and I know the weight of it. This was heavier, and the stride of it was wrong. Too long. A slow crunch, and then a long pause, and then a slow crunch again, ground being covered by legs that were not built the way legs are built. I went to the front room and got down and eased the curtain back a half-inch with the flashlight off. The motion light over the drive had come on and lit the gravel white and empty. Nothing stood in it. But at the far edge of the light, right where the white gave out into the black, something was going away into the trees. Tall. Thin. Too tall. It did not hurry. It went into the dark, the way smoke goes, up a flue, easy and vertical, and gone. The motion light stood there, lighting an empty drive for another minute, then clicked itself off. And I knelt at that window with the curtain in my fist for a long time after, not moving, until the fire behind me had burned down to coals. I did not sleep. When the window finally went gray, I went out with the rifle in one hand, and I made myself walk the ground. The gravel of the drive held the tracks clear, the same as the first morning, 15 inches, the long toes, the deep claw gouges, and they went all the way around the house and back to the north trees. But it was the wall that took the strength out of my legs. On the siding at the northeast corner, where the scratching had gone, there were marks in the wood, 4 of them, parallel, run down the boards in long, shallow furrows, the paint curled up out of them in ribbons. They started above my head. I am a shade over 6 feet, and I reached up, and I could not touch the top of them without going up on my toes, and whatever had put them there had done it standing flat on the ground, dragging down, which meant the shoulder that drove them was taller than the top of my reach, 8 feet more. I stood there with my hand up against the lowest of the 4 furrows, and I did not want to turn my back on the trees to go inside. And I had to, so I did, and it was the longest 20 feet I ever walked. The cameras. I had forgotten the cameras until I was back in the house, with the door bolted, and the furniture I had dragged in front of it in the night still sitting there in the daylight, looking foolish. I got them and brought them in and put the cards in the laptop one at a time. The drive camera had fired once and caught nothing, an empty lit driveway, tripped by the motion light coming on, or by nothing at all. The back camera had caught a deer, a doe, running across the slope in the small hours, flat out and terrified, her eyes gone to white coins in the flash, running from whatever the camera had not been pointed at. And the north camera, the one facing the trees the tracks came from, had fired 3 times, and the first 2 frames were black timber and nothing, and the third one I have not stopped seeing since. It was blurred, and a branch cut across the near edge of it, and it was half swallowed in the dark past the reach of the flash, but it was there. Something stood at the edge of the trees. It read like a person at first glance, and then everything in the body refused it, because it was too tall by half and too thin, and the arms hung down too far, and the head, where the flash had just caught the top of it, before the dark took the rest, the head was wrong. There was a pale shape to it, long, and up off of it went a spread of lines like a bare branch against the sky, like antlers on a skull. Low in the pale shape, 2 points had caught the flash and thrown it back flat and white. 2 eyes with no color in them at all, looking straight into the lens, straight at the little red light of the camera, straight through it, at me. I did the math that a scared man does. Marion had marked a day on that feed store calendar and told me to be gone before the full moon, and I had looked it up on the dead browser's one working corner, the little clock app that still ran, and the full moon fell on the 24th. That gave me 6 days. I spent them the way a man spends the last of his money, carefully and too fast at once. I boarded the ground floor windows from the inside with lumber I found stacked in the workshop, screwing the boards across the weakest of the glass, the wide panes in the front room, the sliding door onto the deck. I checked the rifle and the shotgun over and over until my hands could do it in the dark, and I laid out ammunition in the rooms I might get pushed back into. I set the cameras again each evening and pulled the cards each morning, and every night the tracks came closer. The first nights of that week, they held to the tree line the way they had, that deep pressed place where it had stood and looked in at me. Then they came up onto the open ground below the deck, then up the slope. On the night of the 22nd, I woke to the scratching again, and this time it was not on the front room wall. It was on the boards I had screwed over the deck door. It went on longer than it ever had, unhurried, a long nail dragged back and forth across the wood I had put up to keep it out. And I lay in the dark upstairs with the rifle across my chest, and understood that it was not trying to get in, not yet. It was letting me hear that it knew what I had done, and that the wood was a joke between us. I kept losing pieces of days even then, even watching for it, even with the note on the mirror. Not the long stretches from before. Just a slip here and there, an hour gone at the woodpile, a walk to the north tree line I would find in the mud on my boots but not in my memory, as if some part of me kept its own appointments up there, while the rest of me was not invited. I stopped fighting it as hard as I had. That frightens me more than anything, looking back at it. A man can only stand at the wall of himself and push for so long before his arms give out. On the day of the 24th, the woods were wrong from first light. There was noise in them all day, off in the north timber, branches breaking, a heavy dragging, and once a sound like a green tree being torn in two lengthwise. A groan and then a crack that rolled down the slope, and I felt it turn over in my chest. The cameras caught nothing all day but running deer, and, near noon, a coyote going flat out across the open with its ears pinned, headed south, away, the way everything with legs was headed. And when the lights started to go long and gold, I understood that I was not going to be able to sit inside those boarded windows and wait for the dark to come to me. I have never in my life been able to wait for a thing in the dark. I would rather walk out and meet it. That is not courage. On a hunt, it is the thing that gets a man killed, and I knew it. I got my pack. I put water and shells and my good flashlight in it. I took the rifle and went out into the last of the day to find where the tracks came from. The cold hit me the second I cleared the deck, and it was not a right cold for October, not a mountain evening chill. It was a January cold, a cold with teeth, and my breath went out of me in a thick cloud that hung in the still air longer than breath should hang. There was no sound, no owl working up to the night, no small thing moving in the brush, nothing. I walked the tree line north until I cut the tracks. They were fresh, and they were deep, deeper than before, pressed hard as if the thing that made them weighed more with the moon coming up. They went north, into the heavier timber. I followed them with the rifle up, my thumb near the safety, my heart going slow and hard. The trail took me maybe 2 miles, in and out of the trees, doubling on itself the way a hunting animal quarters a country. And then the timber opened ahead of me, and there was moonlight coming down into a clearing, and I got low and used the trunks and went in careful. The clearing was a circle, near enough a perfect one, 50 feet across, with no trees standing in it. And that was the first wrong thing, because the pines around the edge of it did not lean in toward the open the way trees lean toward a gap in the canopy to reach the light. They leaned away. Every one of them around that ring bent back from the open ground, the way a crowd leans back from what stands in its middle. In the center of the clearing, there was a stone, a slab of it, waist high, flat on top, gray and old, and cut by weather. And even in the moonlight, the top of it showed dark, stained dark, old stain gone, almost black. And the moon lay a wet-looking shine across it that old dry stone has no business holding. Around the stone, cut into the bare earth, in rings inside of rings, were the marks. The same figure from the boundary trees, the tall thing with the long limbs and the branching head, over and over, circling the stone, all of them facing in toward it. I stood at the edge of that clearing, and I could not make my feet carry me into it. The air in there was heavier. It had a smell, the cellar smell I had caught in my first hour on the property, only thick now, the smell of ground that the sun has never once touched, and under it another smell, sweetish and low, that I knew from field dressing game, gone bad. Nothing in that clearing had moved for a long time. It had the stillness of a held breath. A twig went behind me, one dry snap, and I came around with the rifle up. The trees were black between their trunks, and my eyes could not push into them. Then something moved to my left, low and quick, a tall, dark shape slipping behind a pine, and I swung to it and it was gone, and off to my right a low sound answered, a dry clicking rattle, like a bone chime, like teeth. I backed toward the edge of the clearing to keep the open ground at my back instead of the trees. I got the flashlight out with my offhand, the rifle up with the other. Whatever it was went around me, staying just past the throw of anything I could see by circling me the way I had followed it. And I understood, with a sick lurch, that I had not tracked it here at all. It had walked me here, on its own ground, to its own stone, on its own night. The circling stopped. The whole forest went dead. I put the light up and swept it along the tree line, and it caught the thing mid-step, coming out from between two big pines into the open, and every account I had ever heard of anything, every story the old outfitters told to scare the greenhorns, went out of my head, because none of them was this. It stood a head and shoulders over 8 feet. The body of it was a man's body, pulled long, stretched past what a body can be, the ribs showing under gray skin that had cracked and split like old bark over dead wood. Its arms came down past its knees and ended in hands with fingers twice the length of mine, tipped in claws gone black, curved, the claws that had cut the furrows in my wall. And the head. God, the head. It was a deer's skull, bare white bone in the beam of my light. The antlers came up off it wrong, too many points, branching and branching like bare fingers spread wide. Where the eye should have been there was only dark. And down in that dark, two dull red points hung and did not blink and looked at me. Its jaw hung a little open on the bone hinge of it. Its chest went up and down, slow, patient, the same slow breath from the drive. I did the only thing a man like me knows how to do. I put the front sight on the center of that cracked gray chest, where the heart sits in every living thing I have ever brought down, and I fired. The shot went off the mountain and came back. I saw it hit center, and it did not flinch, did not stagger, did not so much as sway. It tilted the skull on its long neck, slow, the way a man tilts his head at a thing that has puzzled him. My gesture, my own gesture, worn on a dead animal's face, and I felt the last of the ground go out from under my mind. I fired again, higher, and saw the bone of the skull chip white near the socket and spin off into the dark. It pulled its head back, not in pain. There was no pain in it, in what could only be called anger. Its jaw came open all the way, past the hinge, wider than the bone should allow, and out of it came the scream. The wolf that turned into a man that turned into something with no name at all, and it came for me. I ran. I have never run like that, and I hope to God I never do again. The branches tore at my face, and I did not feel them. I crashed down the slope the way I had come. Behind me it was not running. That was the horror of it. It did not run. It came in long strides that broke the brush apart, without slowing, unhurried, gaining a thing that did not need to run because it had never once in 100 years failed to arrive. I could hear the ground take its weight, whump, and a pause, and whump, closing. The house came up out of the dark, its windows lit yellow where I had left the lamps burning. I hit the open ground and ran flat across it. Got a hand on the porch rail, got the door open, threw myself through and slammed it and drove the bolt. I stood there with my back against it, my chest heaving. Through the one front room window I had not boarded, I saw it stop at the tree line. It stopped where the open ground began, exactly where the tracks had always stopped, and it stood there in the moonlight with the moon full white behind the antlers, and it raised the skull to the sky and screamed again, and then it stepped out onto the open ground and came toward the house. The bolt would not hold it. I knew that, the way I knew the shot had hit. I ran the house, pulling lamps off and killing them so it could not see me move. And I got into the kitchen with the rifle and put my back to the cabinets, and the scratching came, and then it was not scratching anymore. Something hit the boarded deck door, and the boards jumped in their screws. Something moved along the outside of the house, heavy, sure, testing. At the kitchen window, the curtain I had not boarded there stirred. Against it, through the thin cloth, a shadow rose up, the branching head turning side to side, searching. The window frame gave a long groan as the weight of it leaned in. The glass ticked. I backed away toward the one place in that house I thought might hold. Glass broke in the front room, not the boarded panes. Somewhere it had found one I had missed, and I heard it come in, heard the boards I had dragged in front of the door knocked aside, heard the leather sectional go over, heavy feet on the hardwood, slow now, in no hurry at all, inside the house with me. I got the basement door open and went down the stairs into the dark. I pulled it shut behind me and threw the deadbolt I had put on 3 days before for exactly this. I dragged the heavy steel workbench across the foot of the stairs and piled onto it every heavy thing I could find in the black. Then I got into the far corner with the rifle up on the door. I stopped moving. I listened. It went through the house above me for hours. I marked the hours by my watch because there was nothing else to do but count them and try to keep my hands from shaking the barrel off my aim. It walked the rooms one at a time. I heard furniture torn apart, heard glass go, heard heavy things thrown down, but that was not what turned my stomach to water. What did was that under the wrecking there was a pattern to it, a searching, a going through. It would rage in a room and then it would go quiet, and in the quiet I would hear smaller sounds, drawers, the shuffle of papers, a cabinet opened and closed, the slow, careful sounds of a thing hunting for one particular object. It came to the basement door more than once. The handle turned, slow, all the way to its stop and back. The way a man tries a latch he already knows is locked, testing, not forcing. The door boomed once as it took a blow, and the workbench slid an inch on the concrete and held. But it was the third visit that has stayed with me, because the third time it did not turn the handle and it did not strike the wood. It stood on the other side of it. I could hear it settle its weight, hear the floor take it. Then I heard it breathe, close, right against the crack at the bottom of the door where a thin, cold draft came through. A long, slow drag of air in, and a longer one out, and under the breath there was a sound I did not want to understand and understood anyway. It was trying to make a word. There was a working in it, a wet clicking shaping in the back of that bony throat, the way a man sounds trying to talk in his sleep, close to speech, and never arriving, and the shape the sound kept reaching for and falling short of had the round, soft front of my own name in it, the start of it. Again and again, patient, low against the wood, as if it had all the years in the world to remember how the rest of it went. I put my hand over my own mouth in the dark so I would not answer it, and I do not know to this day why I was afraid I might. Then the weight lifted off the floor and it went away, back to its searching, room by room, all through the black middle of that night, while I sat in the corner of a rich man's cellar with a rifle that did not work and waited for the light. Sometime near 4 the house went quiet, and the quiet held, and I did not trust it. I sat in that corner another 2 hours after the last sound, until a gray line of daylight showed itself around the edge of the basement door at the top of the stairs. And even then it took me a long while to make my legs carry me up. I moved the workbench off the stairs an inch at a time, wincing at every scrape of it on the concrete, and I put my ear to the door and heard nothing, and I opened it slow with the rifle up, and stepped out into the wreck of the house. It had torn the place apart. The leather sectional was gutted, the stuffing of it pulled out and strung across the floor. Every window I had boarded was broken behind its boards, the cold morning air pouring through. There were furrows cut through the drywall down to the studs, high up, at the height of that shoulder. In the kitchen, the cabinets hung off their hinges, and the big refrigerator door had been pulled clean off and lay in the middle of the floor, and what had been inside was gone or torn open and left. The meat packages ripped, and I did not look at that too long. But the office and the little study off the main room had gotten the worst of it, and they had not gotten it the way the rest had. The rest had been wrecked. Those 2 rooms had been searched. The desk in the office was flipped, its drawers pulled out and dumped, papers everywhere. The study was the same. The built-in shelves swept empty, the books thrown down. I stood in the doorway of it and thought it had been hunting a thing in here, the same as I would be if I had any sense. And it had not found it, or it would not have kept on all night. I meant to run. I had every intention of loading the truck and driving off that mountain and never speaking its name again, and I started to. But a man who tracks for a living cannot stand in a room that was searched all through the night and not want to know what it was hunting for. And there was a part of me by then, a cold, clear part that had stopped being able to feel much. It knew running was not going to be simple. It wanted an answer in my hand before I tried. So before I loaded a thing, I searched the study myself, and I did it the way it had done it, methodical, and I found what it had not. Behind the built-in shelves on the study's back wall, where the books had all been pulled down, one section of shelving stood a little proud of the wall, out of true with the rest. It had been shoved and pried at, gouged, and it had held. When I got my fingers behind the edge of it and pulled, it swung out on a hinge I could not see, and behind it there was a small door in the wall, old oak with a keyhole. I thought of the fancy little key I had turned up days before in the bottom drawer of the bedroom desk and pocketed and forgotten, and it was still in my coat, and it turned in that lock like it had been cut for it, because it had. The space behind the door was not much bigger than a closet, and it was the only room in that house the thing had not been able to reach. There were file drawers, and there was a shelf. On the shelf sat a tin box and a leather notebook gone soft and dark with handling. In a single envelope, my name was on the envelope, in that same good ink hand. I opened the notebook first. It was full, front to back, in a dozen hands or more, the ink and the pencil changing every so many pages, the paper going from yellow and brittle at the front to newer toward the back. And every hand had written the same story. I did not read all of it. I could not. But I read enough to understand that I was holding the thing itself, the record, that every man who had ever kept that house had sat down where I was sitting and written what was happening to him in order, the way I had started doing in my own little book. The tracks, the town that knew him, the days that went missing, the moon coming, the same, and the same, and the same. One man after another, down through the years. Each hand steady at the front of his section, going worse toward the end of it, the letters getting larger and harder pressed, until the hand stopped. A page or two of blank, and then a new hand took up at the top of a clean page, calm, not knowing, starting over. The tracks, the town that knew him, and the last hand in the book was mine. The final section, the newest, ran some 7 years of dated entries up to a week before I first drove up that mountain, and every one of them was written down in my own hand, not a hand like mine. Mine. The way I make my letters, the way I cross a 7, the way my father taught me so it would not read as a 1. Page after page of a man with my writing, keeping that house through 7 years I never lived. Logging the same slow ruin, the losing of days, the thing at the tree line, the moon, the entries getting larger and harder as they came toward the end, until the last one, dated 4 days before the 5th of October, in letters gouged so deep they had torn the paper. The circle holds. It is almost time. The next one will not remember. Keep the line whole. I put the book down. My hands did not feel like my hands. I opened the tin box because I could not stop myself, and inside it were the small, flat leavings of men. Driver's licenses, a dozen of them and more. The plastic, old and yellow, at the bottom of the stack, newer toward the top. Different names on every one. John Merrow, Samuel Ott. Names I had read on the newspaper, microfilm, and every photograph on every card was a dark-haired, light-eyed man of my height and build, near enough. Different men, the same man. Looking out of the plastic with a stranger's version of my own face, there was a watch, a wedding band, a folded photograph of a woman I had never seen, soft at the creases from being carried. And near the top of the stack, its plastic still bright, its lamination still clean, lay a Wyoming license. My picture, my name, my own address in Pinedale, the one I had signed the contract with, the one that should have been in my wallet, in my back pocket. I put my hand in my pocket, my wallet was there. I took it out, and my license was in it, in its window. It was also in the tin, the same card, the same me, twice, once in my pocket and once in a box of dead men's things. I stood there holding both of the cards, the same me twice, and something in me that had been holding quietly onto the idea that I would be walking off that mountain let go of it and did not take it back up again. I opened the envelope last. I already knew it would not save me. The note inside was short, in Thorne's flat ink hand, and it did not explain a thing, and I think now that was a kindness, or as close to one as that man had in him. Coburn, you are not the first to find this room, and you will not be the last man to stand in it reading this. There is nothing in these drawers that will get you off this mountain, and I have seen better men than you spend their last good days looking. The line must be kept whole. Do not break the markers. It is the only thing that holds it in, and it is the only thing that holds it to you. I am sorry. It was me, once, in a coat like yours, reading a note like this. Elias Thorne. I ran anyway. A note in a dead man's hand telling me there was no use running was exactly the thing to make me try. I threw what I could grab into the duffel. My own notebook, the tin, the rifle, water. I left the rest, the good wool and the canned food and the books, all of it. I got in the truck and turned the key, and the engine caught strong. I backed down that raked gravel drive and pointed the nose west, toward Kalispell, toward the highway and the state line, and the ordinary loud world where a man's days stay in a row. The forest ran by on both sides, black trunks and the gray morning between them. I kept my eyes on the odometer. I watched for the fork I had doubled back at on the way home from town, and I took the right branch of it hard west, and I drove 10 minutes. 15. The road climbed and turned and dropped into a draw and came up the other side. I let myself start to breathe. Then I came around a long bend where the timber opened up and the thorn house stood at the end of the road, the trees black behind it, the broken windows dark. I stopped in the drive with the tire sliding in the gravel, and I sat there and I did not understand. I had driven west, the whole time west, watching the sun where the cloud let it through, west away. I put the truck in reverse and backed around. I checked the cheap compass stuck to the windshield, a bubble in oil. I made it red east, and I drove east, toward Hungry Horse, toward the way I had first come in. I marked it this time, out loud. A fallen snag across a creek, a boulder split down the middle, a place where a slide had taken out half the road. I said them to myself as they went by, so I would know them if they came again. They did not come again. Different country, new country, an hour of it, the mountains of the park standing up blue in the distance the way they should, and then the road curved down into a valley and the thorn house stood at the bottom of it waiting for me. I tried it more times than made any sense. The trying got ugly, and there is no dignity in it. North, south, a logging spur I had not taken. Southwest, by the compass, narrow and rough, the truck bucking over the ruts, and the rocks tearing at the undercarriage. Every road, every trail, every pair of ruts through that timber bent back on itself somewhere I could not see it bending, and set me down again in front of that house. I drove until the gas gauge fell to the red, until my shirt was soaked through and my hands had cramped white on the wheel. And on the last of it, on that logging spur, there came a bang from under the truck. The wheel wrenched hard to the right. A grinding started up in the front end. Steam came boiling out from under the hood, and the temperature needle went into the red and stayed. The truck rolled to a stop maybe a half-mile out from the house, close enough to see it through the trees. I got out and I looked under it, and I did not need to be a mechanic. The axle was broken and the radiator was split. The truck was not going anywhere, and neither was I, not in it. I stood on that logging road, with the steam hissing down to nothing and the woods dead quiet around me, and that was when I saw the mark, on a pine to my right, half swallowed in moss, old and deep and gray, the tall figure, the long limbs, the branching head, facing me, facing back the way I had come, toward the house. I looked around slow, and there was another one, cut into a boulder 20 feet off, and past it another on a snag. And I understood what I was looking at, because I had been looking at it all along without letting myself add it up. The carvings did not just ring the yard. They did not just ring the near boundary. I left the truck and walked the line of them off the road, following one mark to the next through the timber, and they curved. Always curved, gentle and sure, the arc of a circle so big I could not see it bend except by walking it. After the better part of an hour of walking, I understood the size of the thing. A ring of them, miles across, cut into every tree and stone and bare patch of earth that fell on the line of it, and the house at the dead center. Not a boundary, a wall. Not to keep a thing out, to keep a thing in. And I was inside it. I had been inside it since the day I turned the key. Every road I drove was a road that ran around the inside of a fence I could not see, and had always gently brought me back to the middle, because there is no driving out of the center of a circle. A man only goes around and around. I walked back to the house because the light was going and it was the only shelter inside the ring, and there is a particular kind of low feeling in walking back toward the thing a man has spent all day trying to leave. The wrecked rooms were cold with all the windows broken, and I put my back to what I could, and I built a fire in the stone hearth, and I sat by it with the rifle across my knees. And I do not know what I was guarding against anymore. Habit again, only habit. And because the office computer still had its power and its little dish still had its patch of sky, I went in and I checked the mail, because a man will reach for any thread, and there was a reply from Nora. It had come in that afternoon while I was out driving in circles. I opened it and I read it and I read it again, and it took the floor out from under me worse than any track or any carving had, because it was warm, and it was ordinary, and it was wrong all the way through. What do you mean, when did we last see each other? She had written. Wade, you were here at Christmas. You slept in the spare room and you fixed the gutter for me, and you and Emma did that puzzle at the kitchen table. Are you feeling okay up there? You have been emailing me every Sunday like always. You sounded fine last week. You said the elk were coming down early. Now you call me up in the middle of the night asking for pictures like you do not remember your own family. You are scaring me. Call me. And she had attached a photograph the way I'd asked, and I sat in that dark office and I opened it. It was the two of us, Nora and me, at her kitchen table, a Christmas tree lit up behind us, a half-done puzzle in front, her leaning into my shoulder, laughing. Me with my arm around her, grinning, older than I feel, a little grayer at the temple than the man I shave every morning, wearing a flannel shirt I have never owned. It was me. Down to the way I favor my bad leg even sitting, the knee turned out, down to the scar on my chin. It was my face, easy and happy, in a life that had been going on without me. A Christmas I was never at, a puzzle I never touched, a gutter I never fixed, and my own sister had sat shoulder to shoulder with it and felt not one thing wrong. That is when I understood the shape of the whole thing, the way a man understands the shape of a room in the dark. I was not going to disappear off the face of the earth when this was done. That would leave a hole, and holes get looked into. No, a man was going to walk down off this mountain, wearing my face and my memories and my voice, a man who crossed his sevens the way my father taught me. He would email Nora every Sunday. He would sleep in her spare room at Christmas. He would send my daughter money on time. He would be a better Wade Coburn than I ever managed to be. And no one, not my sister, not my own girl, would ever know that the real one had ended up in a box of licenses in a rich man's wall. The town knew my name because the name was the part that lasted. The men were just what wore it, for 7 years at a stretch, and then they went to the tree line. I tried to warn somebody. It seems a small and stupid thing now, but I did it, because a man has to. I sat back down at that computer in the wrecked office, the cold pouring through the broken windows, and I wrote it all out, plain, to Nora. Then I wrote it again to the county sheriff's office, and an address off the back of the phone book in the drawer. Then I wrote it a third time to Thorne, no longer asking him anything, just telling him what I knew and what I thought of him for it. I wrote that I was Wade Coburn, the real one, still alive, up on the mountain, and that whatever came down off it, wearing my face, was not me, and that they should not believe it, not the emails, not the man at the door at Christmas, none of it. I read them over and they were clear and they were sane, and I sent all 3, and I saw the little bar crawl across the screen 3 times and tell me they had gone. Then, because something made me, I opened the sent folder to be sure. My 3 warnings were there, at the top, time-stamped, gone out. And under them, below my 3, there was a 4th message I had not written, dated for the coming Sunday, 2 days ahead of the day I was living in. Already sitting in the sent folder waiting for a Sunday that had not happened yet. It was a weekly report. It was cheerful in the flat way I am cheerful. The first snow had come early and clean, it said. The generator was running well. There had been some trouble with an animal getting at the siding, but it was handled now, and the elk were coming down off the high country, and everything on the property was in good order, and it was signed the way I signed things. The thing that was going to be me had already started writing next week, and it wrote a better week than the one I was having. I did not sleep in the house after that. I could not be in it. I took blankets out to the workshop by the generator. I sat up with the light on and the door barred. And somewhere in the small hours the first snow came, early, quiet, filling up the broken country and softening it. By morning the whole property was white and clean, lying like nothing had ever happened on it. The change came on slow over the days after, the way frost comes into a window, so slow that each morning I could tell myself it was the same as the night before. It started in my hands. The skin across the backs of them went dry, and then it went past dry, gray at the knuckles, tight, and a fine crack opened along one of them that did not bleed, and did not hurt, and did not close. My reach got longer. I do not know how else to put it. I would go for a thing on the shelf, and my arm would arrive before it should, and the sleeves of the good wool coat crept up off my wrists. And there was a hunger in me that food would not touch. It got worse near dark. It turned its head toward the north timber, and the tree line the way a compass needle turns. I would come to at the edge of the trees at dusk, with no memory of walking out. The snow pressed down under me, my face turned north. Every night it was a little harder to make myself turn around and go back. Every night a little more of me did not want to. The memories started coming in around then, and they were not mine. They came at the edges of sleep, and then they came in daylight too, whole and sudden, dropped into me the way a stone drops into a still pond, the rings going out through everything after. A man in a stiff collar and a heavy mustache, standing where I stood at the north tree line, holding his own gray hands up in front of his face in the last light and turning them over and over. A younger man in a wool army coat, looking at himself in a bathroom mirror that was not the bathroom mirror I knew, watching his jaw start to lengthen and pull. A man in the 70s with sideburns, his fingers gone too long to work the dial on a black telephone, giving up on it, letting the receiver hang. And with each of them came the feeling of it, the whole of it, the fear, and then the fight, and then the giving out, and then the strange low peace after the giving out. I knew their names when they came, John and Samuel and the others, and I knew that they were not visiting me. I was filling up with them. They were the ones who had worn the name before me, and they were still in the thing at the tree line, all of them. The thing was reaching back down the line and pulling me up into it, the way a man hauls a rope hand over hand, and I was the last few feet of the rope, and Thorn was in there too. I felt him come, newer than the others, a man in a good coat, with a scandal behind him, and a fear of ruin that had carried him up the mountain the same as my emptiness had carried me. The note in the wall was true. He had stood in that closet once, reading an older hand. When his 7 years were up, he had walked back down wearing a face the world knew, gone back to Chicago, back to his holdings and his good coats, and every so often he sent an email to the next broke man with the next fat number in it, because the line has to be kept and the wall has to be fed. A thing passed hand to hand for 100 years does not let its hands go free. It only lets them think they are free, down in the loud world, running a company, until it is time to come up the mountain and stand at the tree line and hand the name to the next one. I thought about the wall. Thorn had written that the markers held it in, and held it to me both. And there was a night, near the end of it, when I took the axe from the workshop and walked out to the nearest carved tree. I had some idea of breaking the line, of cutting the figure clean out of the bark and walking out through the gap into the ordinary world. I raised the axe, and my arms would not bring it down. It was not fear that stopped them. It was the other thing, the thing I was becoming. It did not want the wall down any more than Thorn's careful note had wanted it. The wall was the only thing holding the whole weight of that hungry 100-year-old dark inside the ring. And some part of me was already on the side of keeping it there, already a guardian, already turning to face inward at the center, the way the carved figures faced inward. I lowered the axe. I set it down in the snow and left it there, and I walked back to the house, and I did not try the wall again. A man cannot break a fence that has started to grow into him. I do not know how many days it was after that. The note on the mirror had stopped meaning anything, and I had stopped writing in the little book, or the hand that wrote in it was not asking me any more. But there came a night, cold and still and clear, the snow deep on everything, a moon coming up white over the Swan Range. and I found myself walking out from the house toward the north tree line without having decided to. This time I did not try to turn around. There was almost nothing left in me that wanted to. The snow came up past my boots, and I could not feel my boots anymore, and I stood at the black edge of the trees below the Swan Range and watched the thing come out of them, and I knew it the way a man knows his own name. It stopped at the tree line, the way it always stopped, where the open ground began. It did not come across. It only looked at me out of the dark pits in that white-boned face, the small red coals of it steady, its long arms hanging, its cracked gray chest going slow. Up and down, up and down. I stood in the snow 20 feet from it and looked back, and the last piece of me that was afraid understood the last thing there was to understand. It was not going to take me. It had never taken any of them. It only had to wait at the tree line, patient, while the man walked out to it on his own, because by the end the man always did. The wall did the work. The name did the work. 7 years did the work. All the thing had to do was be there, at the edge of the trees, wearing the last man's face under the bone, and wait. I raised the rifle out of an old habit that had no belief left in it. My hand would not close on the steel. I looked down. The skin on the back of it had gone gray and hard as bark, the cracks running up under my cuff toward my wrist while I watched. I felt them, and I did not feel them, both at once. The thing at the tree line tilted its skull on its long neck, slow, the way I tilt my head when I am working a thing out, my own gesture given back to me off a dead animal's face. And I knew then whose face was under the bone. It was not John's, and it was not Samuel's, and it was not Thorne's. It was the one who had gone to the tree line just before me. It was the last Wade Coburn, and soon it would be this one. Its jaw came open, past the hinge, wider than the bone should go, and out of it came the sound I had heard my first night on the property, the wolf that ends as a man, and I felt my own throat move to answer it, and God help me, part of me wanted to, and then the wanting was not part of me anymore. It was most of me, and then it was all there was. What happened in the snow at the tree line came to me in pieces, because the part of me that held words was going out like a coal, going white and then gray and then cold. The pain came, and it was a long way off, in a body that was becoming something with a longer reach and a colder hunger. My spine drew up, my hands finished. The bone came up through my face, and the antlers came up off my skull, branching and branching, reaching up the way a thing reaches when it has forgotten what hands were for. And the last human thought I had, the very last one, small and clear, was of my daughter Emma at a kitchen table in Bozeman doing a puzzle with a man who would send her money on time, and being glad of it. God forgive me, being glad she would never know. Then that thought went too, and there was only the cold and the hunger and the tree line and the long, patient dark I was made to hold. I have a face of bone now. My hands are not hands. I stand at the edge of the trees, at the center of a ring I will never cross, and I hold the dark in on all sides the way I was made to hold it. I do not sleep. I do not warm. I do not stop being hungry. And the years go around the way the roads went around, without leaving the middle. But the man I was is still in here. They do not put that in the note. All of us are still in here. John and Samuel and the sideburn man and Thorne and the last Wade and this one, all of us folded down into the thing at the tree line, awake, holding the dark, waiting out our 7 years until it is our turn to wear the bone and stand in the snow and watch the new man come. And tonight, far down the valley, headlights are coming up the mountain. I can see them from the tree line, small and yellow, swinging back and forth as the road doubles on itself, climbing. A truck laboring on the grades, loaded down. There is a man behind the wheel. I cannot see his face from here, but I do not need to. He is my height and my build, near enough. He is dark-haired and light-eyed. He answered an email he almost deleted, because he was broke and he was alone and his life had gone quiet in the way that makes a man ready for any door that opens. The first payment is already sitting in his account, more zeros than he is used to seeing that are not owed to somebody. Half the money now, half when the 6 months are up. He will pull into the raked gravel drive and cut the engine and hear how quiet it gets. He will find the manual on the island and the note beside it. He will keep the line whole because the note will tell him to, and because he will not understand yet why he wants to. And on Thursday he will drive down to Ledger for batteries and coffee. The bell will ring over the door. Marianne will look up from the register and smile like she is glad, because she will be glad, and she will call him by the name. Back already, she will say. I figured you for Thursday, same as always. And he will stop in the middle of the floor, and he will look behind him to see if there is another man come in at his back. There will not be. The headlights are almost to the last bend now. I can hear the engine over the dead quiet of the snow. In a minute the road will straighten and the house will come up out of the dark in front of him with its lights that I leave burning, yellow and warm and waiting, and he will think, for just a second before the tired sets back in, that a thing has finally broken his way. I will be here at the tree line. When he steps out of the truck, I will not come across the open ground. I have all the time there is.